All right, let's jump right in. Today we're talking about a massive, fundamental shift in global power, what some are calling the Great Rebalancing. And to help us understand it, we're going to dive into the incredibly sharp analysis of former Singaporean Foreign Minister George Yeo, who really paints a vivid picture of this world in transition.
So, George Yeo kicks things off with this really powerful image to describe a superpower that feels like it might be in decline. This isn't just about economics or politics. It's a stark warning about how unpredictable things can get when the old world order starts to crumble. The stakes, well, they couldn't be higher.
And that really gets to the heart of it, right? Because according to Yeo, this whole story isn't just about what's happening between countries. Something really deep is happening inside the United States, a kind of crisis of confidence that has huge implications for all of us. Okay, so let's start right there with what Yeo describes as America's deep pain. This is really the first big piece of the puzzle if we're going to understand this great rebalancing.
Just try to wrap your head around this number. And get this, that's not the total U.S. debt. Nope, that's just the annual interest payment on the debt. It's now bigger than the entire U.S. defense budget. Yeo points to this and says, look, that's a clear sign of a system stretched to its limits, a situation he just flat out calls unsustainable.
Now here's a really sharp point from Yeo. He argues that the most popular political slogan of the last decade is in itself an admission of this new reality. Think about it. Make America great again automatically implies that it isn't great right now. It's not a statement of strength, it's a cry of nostalgia. And the key thing here is that it shows a widespread feeling inside the country that something important has been lost.
And you can see this internal pain popping up in a few different ways. Yeo points to the serious drug crisis, not just as a legal issue, but as a symptom of a society that feels a need to numb the pain. He sees these bitter political divides where, interestingly, both sides are looking backward, trying to get back to some different version of the past instead of building a new future. And this self-doubt, he says it's spreading. He even tells the story about his old classmates from Harvard Business School now asking him, are we on the decline?
Okay, so while all that is happening in the West, we need to pivot because there's this other massive, historic shift happening in the East. And Yeo's framing here is crucial. He doesn't see it as a new rise, but as a historic re-emergence. Yeo's point is that to really get what's happening now, you have to zoom out and see the last 500 years as, well, a specific and maybe temporary cycle in history. From Columbus all the way to China's economic reforms, this was an era of almost complete Western dominance. But we've all considered normal might actually be the exception, not the rule in the long arc of history.
And this is maybe the single most important idea to grasp from his perspective. He argues that the rise of China and India isn't some aggressive new conquest. He sees it as ancient civilizations just naturally returning to the prominence they had for most of human history. It's a recovery, things just rebalancing back to their historical norm.
And the whole mindset behind this reemergence is fundamentally different. Yeo draws this super sharp contrast. He says Western expansion was often driven by this desire to conquer and convert people, to make others like themselves. But he argues that powers like China and India historically just haven't had that impulse. Their focus has been much more on their own internal world.
But hold on. This reemergence isn't a done deal, it's not inevitable. For Asia's most powerful country, the biggest threat, according to Yeo, doesn't come from the outside, it comes from within.
So that leads to the million-dollar question, right? If China is so massive and historically self-contained, what on earth could possibly throw its rise off track?
Well, the answer, if you look at history, has always been the same. For a civilization as huge as China, outside powers can only really become a major threat when the country is already sick on the inside. It's all about internal health and unity.
And Yeo has this absolutely fascinating theory about the root of this internal sickness. He traces China's #1 problem, corruption, all the way back to its cultural bedrock, Confucianism. It's a philosophy that holds society together by creating obligations based on your relationships, family first, then friends, and so on. But that very system creates what he calls a slippery slope, where the line between a gift, a favor, and a flat-out bribe can get really blurry, and that can hollow out the system from the inside out.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. You've got a self-doubting America on one side and a re-emerging Asia dealing with its own internal demons on the other. So what kind of world does that actually leave us with?
We are heading into what pretty much everyone is now calling a multipolar world. And what does that mean? Well, basically, no one's the single boss anymore. Instead, you've got multiple centers of power, the US, China, Russia, India, maybe Europe, all competing for influence. It makes for a way more complicated and dynamic global chessboard.
So how's the West handling this new reality? Well, Yao uses this brilliant analogy, the 5 stages of grief. He says the West has already gone through denial, dismissing Asian success as just copying. Then came anger, with accusations of cheating and theft. And right now, he argues, we're in the bargaining phase, trying to negotiate trade deals and investments. The final stages, depression and acceptance, well, those are still ahead.
So what's the new rule of the game? How do you survive in this world? Drawing a metaphor from Tai Chi, Yao explains that in a world that's constantly shifting, standing perfectly still is the most dangerous thing you can do. To keep your balance, you have to be in constant fluid motion, always adapting to the forces around you.
And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? As this great rebalancing picks up speed and the old world order fades away, this isn't just a question for presidents and diplomats. In a world of constant change, how do any of us keep our balance?